played my second round in Prague, and guess what? I flew all the way to the Czech Republic just to play another American child. That is right, I got paired up against an 8-year-old, and not any 8-year-old, but an 8-year-old Prodigy who has been training since she's been 4 years old with top GMs, including, I think, lessons from Magnus Carlsen and currently training with Grandmaster Susan Polgar. So how did it go? Well, let's take a look. And also, I did get prepared by Grandmaster Hammer, so it was Grandmaster versus Grandmaster preparation. One of us a little younger than the other. So I started like I always do, with d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, knight f6, and in my preparation here, it was to take on d4. Most of the time, black recaptures with a pawn, and it gets into a very easy to play position, not a lot of opening tricks, but what we were expecting from her was to take with the knight. And luckily, she did as expected. I mean, what would I do if I had no opening preparation against an 8-year-old? I would probably just crumble. e4, trade off the knights, and here black plays c5. The idea in openings like this is that white gets a really big center, but black is able to attack it. I develop my knight while also protecting the pawn. We get a little trade here. This is main theory. Check, and here we trade off bishops as well. Now we get a castle from black. I continue developing my bishop, and here she actually starts thinking, because even though she doesn't have any weaknesses, this is actually a pretty tricky position to play as black. As you can see, currently all of her pieces are on the back rank, so that means that she's going to have to come up with a plan to develop without getting in the way of her piece's development. Yes, can you so I can keep recording? What's wrong with my shoes?
Granny forgot her slippers.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's called class. You can't force taste on people.
These aren't granny shoes.
These are very cute.
Mom's shoes.
These are cute loafers, you asshole. So the reason why this position is a little bit awkward is because you want to put your bishop on the fianchetto, but you can't push b6 right away because then d5 comes, and if black takes, the rook is trapped. Andrea, shh, please. The other option is to develop your knight, but then again, you run into a tempo from the d5 pawn push. So instead, the only good variation here is continuing with knight d7. Here I castle, she starts to prepare for the fianchetto, and I continue playing into Hammer's preparation. That's right, my memory was serving me because I crammed an hour before because I was up so late the night before trying to record these game recaps, and I think I'm doing that once again because it is 12:31, and you know why? Because I had to wait for the little gremlin to finish her recap, and you know how long that took? An hour and a half. So that's why I'm always tired. It's always Andrea's fault. Okay, with me, Andrea! Shush! I pushed and she takes the pawn. And here, my instinct is to take with the bishop. That looks like an incredible move. But what happens? I mix up my theory. I mix up my theory with the other line where black is supposed to play knight to c5 first and then bring out the bishop to fianchetto. And in this line, you're supposed to take with the pawn. That being said, these lines looked really similar. She took the pawn, and I kept remembering the preparation that I crammed, and I was like, even though bishop takes feels right, I'm pretty sure this was in the prep. So I make my first mistake because I rely on memory rather than intuition. That's my bad. She continues developing her bishop. I put my rook on the open file because if I don't put my rook on the open file, let's say I was starting to over defend my pawn, then she can get on the open file first. Versus in this variation, I would be able to take queen takes and then bring my own rook to the open file. I don't know which top grandmaster said it, but you know, an open file is the rooks for the taking. Honestly, I kind of just made it up because I couldn't remember the proper quote, but you get what I mean. All right, so she continues developing and she puts pressure on my d-pawn. I defend it with my rook. This position is already looking pretty interesting. I have a pass pawn, which, you know, if it gets all the way to the end, it could turn into a queen. That's the dream here. But at the same time, it's also an isolated pawn, which can be a weakness. When you have an isolated pawn, your goal is to try to keep as many pieces as you can on the board, because the more pieces that get traded off, the more likely you are to go into an endgame where that isolated pawn is going to be a weakness. She brings her rook to an open file with tempo, attacking my bishop. I just quietly retreat, continuing to defend my pawn. Here, I was expecting queen d6. I thought it would be really important for her to block my passed pawn, but instead she played rook c5, and here I thought, did I miss something? Is there a reason I can't push? So I sat here for a while thinking, and I calculated that after the pawn push, the bishop could take my knight, and I could recapture back. And even though I have this really bad looking pawn structure for white, there's no way black can take advantage of it, at least in the short term. I have this powerful bishop eyeing down the black king, and I have this pawn that's only 2 squares away from promotion. So it feels like it's not a good position for black. I also calculated other ideas like her bringing her knight to the center or here, and the one move I didn't calculate was the best move and the move that she basically immediately played. It's always a bad feeling when you sat there for like 10-15 minutes calculating all these moves, and the move your opponent makes, one you didn't even think about. That's a bad sign. That means that you should be doing more breadth and then depth into your moves, which is actually, I think, something that I didn't do properly during this game. Even though I was trying to, I was usually calculating like 4 or 5 variations when it was time, but what ended up happening often is I would miss the one variation that was the most important. Am I rusty or do I need practice? Shout out to our very friendly arbiter. He's working hard. It's midnight, and he's been putting up with us recording here, so go Prague Chess Festival, thank you for putting up with us. And Andrea, that's a big one. Best move here is blocking with the bishop. Why is this the best move? Because my bishop is way too dangerous to keep pointing towards her king. This rook is never gonna be able to move away because this is always gonna be a threat, so this is a great move for her. And I have to continue defending my pawn, so I play queen f4. She trades off bishops as she should, and here she plays knight to d5, which is actually a tricky move. Here I start tanking. And let me tell you about some of the options I considered. Initially, I considered just moving my queen backwards here so that I can continue defending the pawn. But then I started stressing about this variation, where even if I play certain moves to defend it, there's all of these tricks in the future that include forking my king and my queen. And let me say this, one Botez gambit is plenty for a tournament. You know, we don't have to overdo the branding here. Other moves I considered were trading off the queens, coming on to h4. What else did I consider? I looked at queen d2 as well for a while, which apparently was the move where I would be +2, but for some reason I just couldn't find good variations after queen takes. I should have calculated a little bit deeper. Honestly, I think I spent so much time thinking about queen g3 that I didn't even take queen d2 seriously. And I had already been thinking about the idea of a pin, because in this other variation, where I would trade off my queens here and queen would take, I was calculating all of these tricks with attacking the rook and keeping the pin. But yeah, somehow I missed the best move here. And I think that goes to show that before you start getting deep into variations and thinking something is the best move, like queen g3, you should really look at all your options. I should have gone here and honestly, almost like a kid, been like, I have this option, and this option, and this option, and maybe this option, and maybe this option, etc. Whatever the option is, you should look at all of them, and then you should start going through them and saying whether or not something works, because otherwise you might have a blind spot. So I'm gonna try doing that tomorrow and seeing if it improves my chess. I played this line because I thought it was actually very tricky for black. She traded off, I traded off, and if you remember, you're not supposed to trade off pieces when you have an isolated pawn, but I was calculating all of these variations where I could potentially promote in time, and I thought it would at least be hard to defend against, and obviously I didn't want to draw against a lower rated player, especially with the white pieces, but you know, for whatever reason, I thought this was my best chance. She's attacking my rook here, and there's a lot of moves I would love to do that fall to a trap. For example, pinning the knight to the rook. But then all of a sudden there's this fork, which I can't take because then I get back rank checkmated. So the move I decide to do is just a simple rook d2. I had calculated this really long line with rook d3 as well, because once again, I was trying to go through all my lines, but this is the line I looked into, and it seemed a little bit sus for white because I thought now black can remaneuver, block off the file, and I'm probably going to end up losing that pawn. Instead, she moved her knight back. Once again, I can't take because I'm gonna get checkmated. I shoot her away, she retreated, and here I played g4, which I thought was a pretty good move. The idea here is that now I'm avoiding the back rank checkmate threats, and I'm also preparing for my knight to come in to defend and attack, and at the same time, if this rook ever moves, which I could also force it to move, then I get this nice g5 push should I need to kick the knight away. Here, she played rook to d5. I completely missed this option, which the computer says is winning. And honestly, like, it's this really deep variation that I'm not even gonna go into now. If you wanna calculate it and practice your chess, good for you. You're gonna be a very strong player. But instead, I took thinking that this was also going to be a good variation for white. She recaptured, and here I want to get my rook to e7. I can't get it to e7 right away because the knight is defending. So first I have to kick off the knight retreats, and now I have my rook to e7. Here I realize that, you know, worst case, I'm drawing this game because I could always win a pawn in exchange for my passed pawn. So at least I'm not going to be down a pawn, which is actually a nice peace of mind to have when you have an isolated pawn in an endgame. And here she takes my pawn, which is not a move I was expecting. I was expecting rook to d8, but also here I was starting to get into serious time trouble. We were on move 28 and I had 2 minutes or so left. And because I had 2 minutes or left, I kind of rushed into it and I just recaptured back the pawn. But here, once again, I should have thought of my options more, even in time pressure or even on my opponent's time. The winning move here was actually rook c7. The idea behind this is that you're trying to push and then pin the rook. If I played this, what I was afraid about was the pawn move to g6, taking away this square from my knight. And then I kind of looked into it and I saw d7, knight e5, and here I just couldn't figure out how I'd make progress. I basically stopped calculating because I thought, oh, well, you know, if I can't get my knight in, I probably can't continue the attack. But you have a really simple move here. I can't play rook to c8 because the knight is just going to take the pawn. So all I had to do here was f4. Well, now that I see how close I was to a win, I kind of feel bad. Then again, one thing I'm trying to do with myself this tournament, which sounds a little bit soft, which I don't like, but long term it's very important, is to be kind with myself in making mistakes. I haven't played a classical tournament in a while. I'm going to be playing this tournament and then Iceland and then hopefully more tournaments. It takes a while to shake off the rust. I still played this game pretty well even with missing this. I think I had like a 93.3% accuracy according to Twitch chat, so I don't know how accurate that is. But I did miss this line in which I would have been winning. Even though I only had 2 minutes on the clock, hopefully I'll be able to warm up and play a little bit better. So here I took the pawn, she attacked my pawn, and here I thought, okay, I'm probably gonna win the b pawn, which is why I like this variation and played it quickly, even in time pressure. I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna get a pawn up. Like, what else can I ask for in this position, given that I didn't see how I could have completely won the position? Here, my plan was to move my rook to b7 to take this pawn. Black can't capture because of the back rank checkmate, but I wanted to make sure that my knight could still come to this square before the move g6. So I first decided to kick the knight away. She went back, and then I moved my knight to f5. At this point in the game, we were only on move 31, and I had about a minute on the clock, so I did not have a lot of time to think. She pushed g6, at which I, with my 1 minute on the clock, thought, oh my god, did she just blunder? Am I gonna finally beat this 8-year-old prodigy? So I go check, she moves her king up, and here I'm trying to calculate before flagging. I remember my clock went all the way down to 10 seconds, and the first idea I looked at was, okay, what if I take check? The problem with this line is that after the king comes this way, black wins my pawn back, and even if I win the pawn on the side, I'm not going to be able to save my pawn over here. So I was like, okay, well, this looks like a draw. So instead, I decided to take with the knight, and you know, it still looks drawish, but I just thought that this line, which we played into, would have better chances because at least after all the trades are done, I still have my pawn. That being said, the king is 2 squares away, and I don't see how I'm going to defend it, but I hope that, hey, maybe in the process of her king coming over, I can hope to win a pawn on the other side. She defended her pawn. I defended my pawn. She starts moving her king closer to my pawn. There's no way for me to defend it, so instead I'm just making space because in the endgame you need to bring your king to the center of the board. She offers her knight here. I push, hoping that she'll take my knight, because then I would be winning, because this is the kind of pawn structure where black can never take a pawn since you can promote. Of course, there's no way she's ever going to fall for this, but you know, you always want to be tricky. So instead she moves her knight back, preparing a second attacker on my lonely pawn. Again, that's why you don't want isolated pawns in the endgame, but at least this pawn is an extra pawn, so not the end of the world. I start bringing my king in closer, as you always should during endgames. Her king moves closer, I come in, and here she's able to regain the pawn that I dropped on the floor. And this is my last move before making time control, which means that after 40 moves, you get another 30 minutes. So woohoo, we're not gonna flag like Andrea did last time she played a kid. I take the knight, king takes, and I play into opposition. And this game is a draw. But I did try to be a little bit tricky in my defense. I kept trying to trick her until the very end. Here she pushed her pawn, she didn't want to give up opposition, and I pushed my pawn as well. And you might be thinking, how are you even trying to be tricky with this? Well, the idea is I'm trying to lure her to take this pawn, because there are certain variations in which it could actually be winning for me. Or at least, no, actually I did think it was winning. She pushed, I moved my king over, and what I was praying she would do was move her king over here. And the way you should count this is not like I go here, she goes here, I go here, she goes here. The way you should do it is count by numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And keep in mind that I move first, which means I would promote first, and then I could check her king, win her queen, and take this pawn. That being said, she is too clever, so she just puts her king in opposition. I'm like, okay, you want to try this way? At least we can go a little bit longer. But no, you know, we just go here, repeating the position, and I got a draw. And the way Hammer put it on stream, I really liked. He's like, today, Rami is probably going to be happy that she got a draw against Alexandra because I'm higher rated, she had the black pieces, but in the future, I'm going to be like, hey, I got a draw against Rami Milner. I never like losing elo. I don't like drawing a lower rated player with the white side of the pieces, and I had winning opportunities that I did miss. All of this being said, I'm really impressed by her play and her focus. She didn't leave the board once throughout the game. So I hope to see her as a grandmaster one day. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm sorry if it was a little bit disjointed. It's been a long day. It is almost 1 a.m. now. I'm gonna go try to get some rest so I can prepare for tomorrow's game. I'm playing a 1600. If you're watching this on time, well, hopefully we'll see you on the stream. And if you're not, thank you anyway. Have a good one.